Hello and welcome. This is Mrs. Smith reading Indians of the Oaks by Melicent Lee. This is part 2, Secrets of the Trail, and I'm reading chapter 2 in this video. All right, this chapter is called In the Meadow Marshes. Sometimes the herb woman wandered in the meadow marshes early in the morning. The marshes followed along the creek waters, lapping up the ripples that flowed over. Summertime found many plants in flower. Spring rains and warm sunshine opened up their petals. Springtime in the land of the Kumeyays is the time of rain, whether it rains in November or December or later. When the rain comes in the when the rain when the rain comes, the spring comes, and the brown thrasher, the bird with the long curved bill that sings like a mockingbird, the brown thrasher always tells the Indians when the rain is coming. One summer morning the herb woman put on her basket cap and carrying net, the cords of which crossed over the cap. Then she tucked the cradle and baby under her arm and marched off toward the lizard tail patches. Now these lizard tails are not real lizard tails. They are plants with thick stubby flowers that look like lizard tails. The ground was so damp that the herb woman hung her baby on the bough of a button ball or sycamore tree. The sun shone in the baby's eyes, so the mother picked a large sycamore leaf and fastened it with a little stick to the shade of the cradle. The woven shade of the cradle was too narrow to hide all the sun. "When I make another cradle, I'll make a broader shade," said the herb woman. She dug the roots of the lizard tails with her digging stick and lined her net with sycamore leaves. Then she filled her net with roots. She had not brought her seed basket this morning. As she bent over the net, filling it with the roots, a beautiful little water snake slipped over her bare feet. She did not move. She was not afraid of any snake except the rattlesnake. She even hunted for rattlesnakes because the oil was good for rheumatism. She always kept an earthen jar of rattlesnake oil for old people. Rattlesnakes were good to eat, too. They were sweet and tender. They were very nice when boiled, but they did not smell nice when they were cooking. While the herb woman was thinking about good things to eat, she began to hear a steady humming over her head. She looked up into the branches of the tree and saw one little golden brown bee. The bags on its legs were stuffed with blue pollen from flowers. The little bee flew straight into a crack in the tree trunk. Another bee flew in too, then another, then another. The baby cradle was hanging very near the bee hole. For a moment the herb woman thought she would take it away. Then she thought, "The bees are too busy to disturb my baby, and my baby is too quiet to disturb them." So she left the baby hanging there. She knew everything about wild bees. She was not afraid to gather a whole colony in her lined net when it swarmed. She wondered why there were more bees than there used to be. She did not know that the white people had brought bees to the land of the Kumeyaay. Many of these bees had flown away into the wild forest. In the marshes grew a tall clover. The herb woman gathered many sprays of this clover. It filled her net to overflowing. Every Indian man and woman and child could eat this clover often, she said. "I will gather it for the whole tribe." She decided to cook some of it right then. "My Yuma cousin has been eating too much acorn mush," she said. The Yuma cousin had never tasted acorn mush before, and she liked it so well that she didn't know when to stop eating. "She needs a meal of this clover. I will cook some for her. If everybody knew all the secrets of the woods, I should not have to do all these things." But she smiled to herself. She was glad that everybody didn't know the secrets. She liked to be a doctor. She walked into the wettest part of the marshes until she found a patch of tall reeds. They were not the reeds that the Indians used for weaving their seed baskets. They were very thin, soft reeds with brown seed cases. They were used in making the Indians' basket strainer, except the basket cap, that is the only basket for which sorry, let me read that again. Except the basket cap, that is the only basket for which they could be used. The herb woman needed a basket strainer to cook her clover. She did not split the reeds. She did not soak them. She sat right down on a dry little hill and twisted them very loosely into a basket just as they were. She couldn't have done a thing with them if they had not been fresh. "I guess I'll stay here all day," she said to herself. "I like it here." It took her the rest of the morning to make her basket. It took many days to make a seed basket. "It has taken most of my day," she said, "but it will last me for many moons if I didn't have to give it away." She smiled. Many of the women couldn't make nice basket strainers. Some of them made beautiful ollas, some of them made beautiful winnowing trays for winnowing acorn meal, and some of them made beautiful willow bark skirts, but very few of them made everything well. The herb woman couldn't make a very nice olla herself. She really didn't have the time to practice because she was gathering herbs all day long. She made a beautiful job of that. Now she kindled a fire from a smoking piece of oak punk that she carried in a little olla. She didn't want to bother to use 2 sticks, which she could use to make a fire all the time. It took a lot of strength to use these sticks. It was really a man's job, but she had no man in her family. Her husband had been killed in a war with the enemies of her tribe. She coiled the clover into a cooking olla which she had left upside down among the roots of the sycamore tree. She often made a campfire on this dry little hill, so she kept her olla handy. She filled the olla almost to the brim with fresh water from the creek. She put it on 3 stones which she had placed round the fire. In a short while the water began to bubble. The greens were cooking. Soon she had an olla full of stewed greens. She didn't cook them too long, she cooked them just enough. But there is always too much water left in stewed greens, so she lifted the greens out of the water with a willow stick. She dropped them in her new basket, which she had placed on a nest of leaves. Then she pressed the water out with her stick. The water ran through the holes. "My basket strainer works very nicely," she said. When the greens were dry enough and yet not too dry, she stored them in her net. She said to herself that a big bowl of greens was the best thing anybody could eat. It was good food and good medicine, too. She looked about her for a few things to take home. She still had some of the day left for hunting. She covered the fire with ashes and silently tiptoed over to her baby. The baby was just waking up from a long, long nap. The herbwoman lifted the cradle off the branch very carefully because the bees were thicker than ever, and sat down on a fallen bough with the baby in her lap. She unfastened it from the cradle board to let it kick its feet and wave its arms. Then she fed it and hung the cradle on another branch. The herbwoman hunted through the marshes until she had collected enough things to satisfy her. She found some barred feathers of a hawk that had been caught by a wildcat. She picked them up carefully and smoothed them out. "I will give these to the boys in the village for their arrows," she said. Then she found a piece of red stone called jasper. The stone looked as if an Indian had started to make an arrow point of it and never finished his task. "Perhaps he had to go away to war," thought the herb woman. "It might have been the same war in which my husband was killed. I will give this stone to the medicine man, and maybe he will finish making it into an arrow point. But maybe he won't. Maybe it'll make him sad to touch something that some unhappy Indian could not finish." So saying, she put the stone back on the ground and felt sorry that she had touched it herself. She began to think so much about this unhappy Indian that she started the fire again. She threw some white sage branches into it and stood in the sweet-smelling steam. As the steam flowed over her body and drifted into her nose, all sad thoughts floated away. She felt as happy as she had felt early in the morning. She thought that she had better go home while she was still feeling happy. So she put out the fire, gathered up the ends of her net, unhooked the baby cradle from the bough, and started home. She tucked the cradle under her arm again. Sometimes she carried the baby and its cradle on her head, too. It all depended on what other things she on her back, or what she carried on her head or in her hands. But whichever way she carried the baby liked it. Ever since it was born, it had ridden with its mother up the trail and down the meadow. All right, that's chapter 2, and join me next time for chapter 3.